Welcome to the Pathways to Profitability podcast, personal tales of business success, where we hear local business owners' personal stories of their trials and tribulations that got them to where they are today. Here's your host, Cheryl Mucha, CEO of CFO Your Way.
Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Pathways to Profitability podcast. Our guest today is Mark James of Performance Advisors Group. Mark, thank you so much for being here with me.
It's a pleasure to be here. I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to talking to you and your audience this morning.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing with our audience your story, but let's just start with a little bit about you and the company.
Yeah, I grew up in a small farming community in Northern Illinois. I live in Northern Illinois today. I've lived in some other places. And so I grew up in a small business family. So business was always sort of, in my world as a kid growing up. And I believe everybody should at one point or other work in retail because that's really where the wheels of commerce begin to turn for everything. So came up in a small business family, went to business school, was in a number of different positions in my career in sales and marketing. I was in the oil business. I was in the securities industry. Incentive and motivation programming, which is some of what the things I do today. So, and I always knew that I wanted to be in business for myself. I would consider myself an ardent capitalist and believe in enterprise. So that's what's led me to where I am today.
So thinking back on that very diverse career, right?
Yeah,
What was the thing or the person or the trigger that said, I'm going to do this on my own?
Part of it was growing up in a family where my parents owned and operated a retail jewelry store. So there, I was around businesses from early on. And for some reason, just the thought of being in business for myself was always appealing to me. I knew I wasn't going to be taking over the jewelry store. I never really had any interest in that. And my parents didn't push me to that. They let me do, what I wanted to do.
Right.
So it came from a number of different places. I can't put my finger on any one particular thing, but I just always sort of knew at some level that I wanted to be in business for myself. Maybe because I like being in control.
That's
like
a good
all
trait
of us,
to have, right?
Well, kind of, yeah. You want to be in control to some extent. So that was part of it.
Yeah. So, obviously you worked with your parents, so
Yes.
you were surrounded by that entrepreneurial spirit,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And, I always say, and you'll hear me through this podcast over and over again, say we had to get those experiences in order to be where we are today, right?
Oh, yeah.
So without that grind, that working for someone else, not being in control and being the learner, all those things need to come together at a point in our life where it makes sense to be our own boss and start this journey of entrepreneurship.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you have to have experienced it, whether as an employee or in some other forms or fashion, because it can be lonely being a business for yourself. In fact, I was having a conversation yesterday with a marketing intern that I'm mentoring for a organization I belong to, a nonprofit. And I was telling her yesterday about what the people you'll encounter in life who are entrepreneurs, and a couple of things about being an entrepreneur. There is always a struggle between two emotions for a lot of entrepreneurs. On the one hand is the emotion of sheer joy and exhilaration because you're doing it and you're on your own. You're making the decisions. You're in control.
Right.
The competing emotion is sheer terror. Because if things go south, it's on you, and it's all on you. And so you have a lot of tremendous response. You have a lot of tremendous, that's a redundant comment, the statement. You have a tremendous amount of responsibility, not only for yourself, but if you have employees, for customers, for your family. So there's always a struggle between those two emotions. The key is to keep those in check, but recognize that in the extremes, it's exhilarating, but at the same time, very terrifying.
All right. Yeah. It's the peaks and valleys of owning a business. It's the high emotion, the low emotion, and just know that when you're on the high, the low's going to come. And when you're in
Yes.
the low, the high's going to come. And just, being able to manage where you are at that moment in time and just have your eye set on what's to
Yeah,
come.
it kind of reminds. I always remind myself of in one of Rudyard Kipling's writings. I don't remember which of his writings it was, but he said that in life you must meet with triumph and tragedy, but treat the two imposters just the same.
Wow. I love that.
That's how you kind of help control and make sure you're staying in your place of equilibrium, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned mentorship with your intern. And I love that. I enjoy mentoring others.
Yeah.
It's so rewarding,
Yeah.
and just to be able to pass our experiences and our knowledge. But other than your parents and in their business and your earlier career, is there someone else that really stands out to you? And you don't have to use their name, but is
Yeah.
there someone else that really stands out to you that gave you a specific skill or a set of skills that helped you make the decision to go out on your own?
Yeah, there are a couple of individuals real quickly. One was a gentleman that I worked for when I was in the oil business early on. It was in commercial industrial sales, so I was selling lubricants and fuels to contractors, manufacturing facilities, local municipalities. He was my boss, and he was a very enlightened guy. And I was fortunate to work for a lot of managers who were really good. I also worked for some that weren't so good. We've all been there. But this particular gentleman really stood out in that in his own way, he encouraged me to think for myself, to think responsibly about how to get the job best done, and to understand that the customer may or may not be right, but the customer is always the customer. So that's
Right.
one individual. Another individual who I still see every Sunday when we go to church. I go to the church where I grew up. He's a gentleman that I think he's in his late 80s, early 90s now, and he's kind of slowed down quite a bit. But when I was a kid, I grew up in a small town, so the fire department of the town was a volunteer fire department. Well, he was responsible for the maintenance of all the fire trucks and all the
Hmm.
equipment. And I used to go down and help him every Saturday with maintenance on the trucks. He showed me how to run a pumper. When you go to a fire and there's a pumper that has to take the water from the fire hydrant to the hoses that
All
they're
right.
using. So he showed me how to run the pumper. He showed me how to wear and use a Scott air pack, which is the air thing that they use when they go into fires.
Hmm.
And just kind of being around him and learning those kinds of things and sort of being hands-on, I
Right.
think gives you a little level of not only satisfied my curiosity, but also um, showed me or demonstrated to me that I can do stuff that maybe I didn't know before. Because
Right.
quite often as an entrepreneur, you have to do a lot of things. You have to shovel coal sometimes when nobody else can or would
Exactly.
do it.
Yeah. And I can imagine all your friends were jealous because you could be on the pumper truck,
Yeah,
right?
it was kind of cool. It was kind of a cool experience. Yeah, it was.
So yeah, to have those individuals in our lives, I think is key.
Yep.
Even though it might not be directly related to what you are doing today, there's still skills that we learn in those moments and in those
Oh,
relationships.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, life is a culmination of what we learn and what we experience
Exactly.
and what we do with those experiences. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the business now,
Hmm.
Performance Advisors Group. Um, One of the things that really stands out to me in our relationship and in our conversations and your messaging on your website is you bring business owners peace of mind.
Yeah. That's my passion, my primary
Yes.
passion. Right.
So talk to us a little bit about that. How do you do that? What's that all about? Because you as a business owner, of course, need to have peace of mind. I as a business owner need to have peace of
Yeah.
mind. And so many business owners don't because of the stress
Yep.
of everything they need to do in their business.
Yeah, the inspiration for that passion came from earlier in my career, dealing with all different sorts of businesses and the various positions I was in when I had corporate jobs. And I observed that so many businesses struggle or outright fail because they just can't see for the forest for the trees sometimes, or they're just so overwhelmed that they just need an independent set of eyes and ears to help them out. So my passion was, how to get people out of that mode where they're constantly struggling, or maybe there's the business and they are circling the drain, so to speak, uh, and helping them to step back and say, okay, let's take this challenge and drill down and find where the root causes of the problem are, so that we can solve them. Because what happens when you get into a sort of a panic mode, or you don't know what to do, you start grasping and striking out at things that have nothing to do with solving your problem.
Right.
Uh,
It's
you,
the easy
yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah,
We
you're doing the
grasp at
easy
the
stuff,
easy
or you're
stuff.
attacking symptoms and not problems. In fact,
Exactly.
one of my favorite statistics, which is admittedly unsettling, but I use it when I'm discussing opportunities with clients to improve their business, is the fact that for a typical organization, this is research from the Conference Board, nearly two-thirds of employees are only one-third as productive as they could be because they simply don't understand what they're being asked to do.
Right.
Basically it's a communication challenge.
Right. Right.
So
And it goes back to the mentorship, right?
yes, yes, and getting a leader or an owner to recognize that they have a response. One of their primary responsibilities as a leader of an organization is to make sure your people have a clear and unambiguous understanding of what's expected, what we're here to do, what our vision is, what our core values are. Another
Right.
one of my favorite statistics from the Human Capital League research, again for a typical organization, only 42% of the employees even know what their own organization's values, mission, and vision are. So it's a little difficult to deliver on those things
Right.
if more than half of your employees don't know what those things are. So again, it's a communication challenge, and communication problems are a very common source of business issues, or a lack of performance in businesses.
Right. And, that leads to employee retention and the cost of
Yep.
turnover and, just having, that open communication to be able to brainstorm or vent
Yes.
even to a superior.
Yeah. In fact, there are 5 questions. I talk about this quite a bit. I do public speaking on business
Right.
topics, and I also use these 5 questions when I'm working with clients on this particular issue of communication. There are five
Right.
questions that employees are always asking that you really need to make sure you're answering, because if they don't have an answer in front of them, they're going to make it up. And human nature is like, nature abhors a vacuum. In human nature, if we don't have an answer to a question, we're going to fill in the blanks.
Right.
And sometimes what we fill
Exactly.
in may not be accurate. So the 5 questions
Right.
are: what is it you want me to do as an employee? How should I do it? Which has implications
Right.
for learning and skill sets. How am
Right.
I doing at it? Which is what I call the performance question. People need to know how they're doing at any point in time, and the feedback needs to be in the moment as much as possible. The
Exactly.
fourth question is, why should I do it? Or alternatively put, what's in it for me? I call it the motivation question. And then
Hmm.
the last question people are always asking in an organization is, where am I going? What's my future here?
Right.
So it's important. So a very simple way to start to address whatever communication barriers or challenges may be in an organization, start by examining, do my employees have the proper
Get it.
answers to those 5 questions?
Yeah. And understand the answers
Yes,
to
and
those
understand
five.
them. Yeah, an answer is an answer,
Yeah.
but understanding may be something entirely different.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and just investing that interest and giving your employees that time changes the whole dynamic.
Yes. Yeah. So implications for in those answers, there's implications obviously for the customer experience, for employee retention, even for attracting, because one of the first things you should do when you're looking at a new hire is to make sure they have those questions answered up front as early as possible in the hiring or the onboarding process. So implications for employee experience, the customer experience, and obviously for results.
Right. Yeah, and happy employees makes for a positive path for the
Yeah,
business. I
absolutely.
mean, so many business owners don't look at their employees as I'll call it an asset of the company, because they're not on the balance sheet, but they, you know,
Yeah,
they're the the most important asset of the
it
company.
is. And what I find interesting about this part of our conversation is that what encourages me about the future is that I'm finding more and more businesses and leaders are beginning to recognize that you can no longer just give lip service to having the right culture and having engaged and satisfied and loyal employees. You really have to work at it. And more,
Mhm.
as they say, owners and business leaders are making the connection that there is a financial impact by having highly engaged and loyal and satisfied employees who are in touch with and aligned with the values, mission, and vision of the organization. It's very important.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no worries.
Yeah. So, how do you define business success, not only for yourself, but for your clients as well?
I define it as, and this relates to peace of mind. You know, having the
Mhm.
peace of mind as a business owner
Right.
is having the business in a state where growth is sustainable
Right.
and you're leveraging your competitive advantage, whatever that may be. And
Right.
in my definition of competitive advantage, it's actually from Jeffrey Gitomer, who I've one of my favorite authors, and he's in the sales world. His
Mhm.
definition of competitive advantage is that something that you're really good at that's important to your customers. You can be really
Right.
good at something, but if no one cares, it's not really a competitive
Exactly.
advantage. Business success, and you can get into the numbers and metrics and measures for each business to measure that success, but just from a big picture point of view, it is having your business in a state where it's high performing such that the growth that you're achieving is sustainable. You're not
Right.
on the dolphin ride on the waves,
Exactly. Yep.
and you're doing some things that are creating or sustaining a competitive advantage versus your competitors.
So
That's business
simple, right?
success, yeah, and then from that flows peace of mind. At least in terms of the
Exactly.
nearly all of the business owners or leaders that I've met, if they could have sustainable growth and a true competitive advantage, that's a really good source of peace of mind.
Right. And a team that gets it and wants to be there
Yeah,
and is aligned with the values of the organization.
yep. Alignment is
Sounds so simple, right?
it, yes. Here's you know what that's well said, Cheryl. In that uh, so much of what needs to be solved to help an organization get to sustainable growth and competitive advantage, a lot of it's common sense.
Right.
And but sometimes the way to get to that solution takes a little effort and work.
Right. Right.
But it's
It,
not rocket science. It really isn't.
right. But it also takes a third party intervention
Yes.
sometimes, just because of whatever limitation, education limitation, time limitation, a communication limitation, whatever it is. That's where you come in, of course, where we come in. Like,
Mhm.
the business owners don't necessarily get the financial aspect of the business. They're good at, I always say, they're good at building their widget, right?
Yes.
Whatever their widget is. All these other things, they need support in.
Yeah. I found the most successful businesses are the ones that are enlightened enough to recognize that they don't have all the answers themselves. None of us has a corner on the market for solutions for
Right.
everything. We all have something to offer. And the better
Exactly.
organizations are the ones that are willing and have the courage to do two things, actually, to reach out and seek help from outside resources, people who can have that independent set of eyes and ears and can see through
Right.
the clutter and help you accelerate your
Right.
trip to getting to root causes to solve. And the other thing is getting owners and leaders to recognize and have the courage to ask their own people, tell us what we're doing wrong. There's a
What do you need?
Yeah,
Right.
what do you need? Tell us what we're doing wrong. And that sometimes takes courage, because one of the challenges, especially for people who come into a leadership role for the first time, and what's amazing, and at least in America, the statistics indicate that someone who comes into a managerial role for the first time, 90% of them have had no formal training or experience in how to lead. So they come in sort of at a disadvantage. They have sort of one arm tied behind their back. And as a result, they struggle to be managers, and then their people struggle as well. So and part of that is I've seen this play out, and it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes when people come into a leadership role for the first time, because they're a leader, they've convinced themselves that they have to have all the answers. They have to be in control, and because they have responsibilities.
Right.
And I try to work to undo that thinking, because the best leaders out there are the ones that recognize that we may need help, and to be open to hearing what people have to say. And when you ask that question as a leader, tell us what we're doing wrong, you better be prepared to listen carefully to what people have to say, and then do something about it.
Yeah, work through it.
Yeah. Because if you don't listen and you don't do anything and people talk, the next time you ask, you're likely to hear crickets.
Exactly. So, yeah. Yep. I was going to say something. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, and all of this, like that, I love that, because it's, so many people think of, oh, I need to bring someone in for this, but it's another expense. It's another cost.
Yeah.
I try to change their mindset, and people need to think about it as an investment in the future. If they want to be successful, you need to invest today to get to point B. Yeah. It's not going to happen if you don't make those investments.
Absolutely. And it has to be an investment versus an expense to be managed mindset.
Exactly.
That's for those of us who are, I'm a business consultant. For those of us who are in that role, I'm always on the lookout for, I want to get a sense of, if I'm talking to a prospect, what's their mindset about how we're going to work together.
Yeah. If it's all about price, it's not, they're not thinking about the future.
Yeah. So, so they need to have that investment mentality, and it makes the job so much easier. And we're able to go farther and faster when we have a client who gets that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for being here. How can our audience find you?
Well, you can find me on the internet at www.performadvisors.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Look me up there. I welcome any and all connections, and anybody who, even if you just want to ask a question or have a conversation about what's going on in business, very happy to do it. And again, I appreciate, Cheryl, you having me on this morning. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Great conversation. There's so many ways we could have gone.
Oh yeah, we could do hours of this, right?
Yeah, we could. 3 hours later, we're still chatting, right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate you being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge with our audience.
Thank you very much.
And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Feel free. Mark has offered for you to reach out to him, so feel free to use him as a resource. He is a wealth of knowledge. Tune in to see all of our episodes at pathwaystoprofitability.com, and have a beautiful day.
That's it for today's episode of Pathways to Profitability. Remember to ask yourself, where can I pay my success forward today?